Welcome in to another episode of the SEC Mafia Football Podcast. Tonight is our 10th episode, so happy anniversary to you, Tyler from Tuscaloosa. How are you, buddy?
10, baby. I give it a 10. We're doing great over here in T-Town this week. It's cold.
I'm a little out of pocket. I'm actually not in Mobile this week as the snow, yes, you heard correctly, the snow in Mobile has everything shut down. I am actually back in North Alabama, so I'm a little bit out of pocket, but that's all right. But tonight we are here to, to put a bow on the 2024 college football season as we had our last meaningful college football game for about 8 months last night.
Sad. It's sad. You get so excited and so pumped up by around, June, July, August, and then football season gets here and it flies by. It's gone just like that. You look up and it's rivalry week, and then you look up and it's selection Sunday, and now we're on through the playoffs, and it just flies by. But it was a fun season, interesting season to say the least. A lot of uncharted territory. A lot of territory yet to be seen, a lot of things that need to be dealt with in the offseason, to say the least. But overall, great season. It's the most wonderful time of the year when fall rolls around and you get to, support your favorite team and get together with families, watch football, do all the things. So.
Yeah, I'm the type of person, I really like the springtime. I like to get out and do a little bit of fishing and stuff. Love the summertime. Love to go lay on the beach and just relax and do nothing. But normally, once that 4th of July holiday break is over, I'm really ready to get into football mode. Right after, the 4th of July break, you start having all the different conference media days, and then all of a sudden the 1st of August rolls around and fall camp starts talking, and you start getting a little bit of intel, start getting a little bit of information, and then you're just ready for football season to start. And then it seems like, once Labor Day hits, it's 110 miles an hour until the end of the season. It is just wide open, and like you said, you blink 2 or 3 times and boom, it's over. And then we're sitting here, waiting for 8.5, 9 months.
Yep, absolutely. And this is the time of year we will probably transition to episode once every 2 weeks. We may do one next week just to kind of start our recap mode of every one of the, sort of a quadplex of teams every episode, meaning like we'll do probably 4 teams and just recap their season, kind of look at what they're doing in the transfer portal here and there. So that's kind of what we'll start doing.
Yeah, we can start next. We can start next week, and we'll take 4 teams per week, and we'll kind of try to divide it up by the more interesting. So we won't take just the 4 best teams and then the 4 worst teams. We'll kind of mix it up where we've got a little bit of mix, and not just do all the popular teams or the teams that's not popular. Whenever I say popular, I mean by the interactions that we've had on social media. So we get a pretty good bit of interaction, obviously, from Alabama people, pretty good bit of interaction from LSU, a little bit of Ole Miss. Auburn, of course, is a lot of interaction, decent amount of Georgia. Not seeing a lot from Tennessee right now, not seeing a lot from Missouri or Arkansas, South Carolina, which those are schools that are further away from where we are. But by all means, if any of you people know any of those fans from those schools that we don't have a lot of interactions with, try to push this out to them, and let's try to get a good fan base that represents every school in the SEC. But we'll kind of split it up, do 4 at a time, and we'll start next week giving kind of like a report card grade for the season. What we thought went well, what we thought did not go well, and kind of give them a grade and start looking at things they need to do for next season. But
yeah, absolutely. And to tie into that, we always put up our SEC Mafia contact information. It's up on the screen. You can pause it right here, go into it. We're now on Spotify. We're on Amazon Music. So once you get into that, download every one of the episodes that we post. That's kind of how we keep up with it. You can post comments on that. Please always leave your comments on YouTube, like and subscribe, and hit the notifications bell. And we will throw ourselves right into the national championship winners, the Ohio State University. This is their first natty since 2014. This has bumped them up now to the second most championships in the AP poll era since 1936. Bama leading that list with 14. Ohio State now in second with 9. Funny enough, Notre Dame is in third with 8, and USC is tied with them at 8. Ryan Day is now a national championship head coach.
Yeah, we knew going into the game last night with Marcus Freeman and Ryan Day that one of those gentlemen was fixing to join the club of national championship coaches. Oddly enough, replacing Nick Saban and Jim Harbaugh, the two national championship coaches who retired last year. But it's crazy when you think about now that Mac Brown's gone from North Carolina, Nick Saban's retired, Jim Harbaugh's went back to the NFL. I think we've only got, 3 or 4 active coaches that have a national championship on their resume. You've got Dabo Swinney at Clemson. You've got Kirby Smart at Georgia. You've got Ryan Day now at Ohio State. And that's it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Jimbo Fisher, who was an active national championship coach, he's no longer coaching currently. So it's crazy whenever you start thinking about the landscape of college football that only 3 active coaches have a national championship.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you've totally broadened the horizon, especially with the expanded playoff now. It's up for grabs for any coach to get their first one now. So, diving into the content of the game, first half looked like a runaway.
Well, hang on before you say that now, because the
second quarter,
the first 10 minutes I thought could not have been any better for Notre Dame. They came out eating up 10 minutes of the clock, running their quarterback 9 times, punching Ohio State in the mouth, and man, Ohio State absolutely responded. They responded with a touchdown of their own. The game kind of went back and forth a little bit. And then Notre Dame was able to score twice in the second quarter to extend that lead to 21-7 by 14 points. And you knew at that point in time, you knew that Notre Dame had to have a stop to start the third quarter and a score, or it was going to get out of hand. And they just could not get the stop. You blinked, and Ohio State was up 31-7. And it was just kind of cruise control from there. Although Notre Dame did crawl their way back into it and make it interesting very late in the game. But, nonetheless, Ohio State was able to kick a late field goal, pull away, and get the win.
Statistically speaking, very, very, very clean game from both teams. There was only 1 turnover that was actually committed by Ohio State. Penalties were not really a factor in this one. Both quarterback comparisons, Riley Leonard, 22 for 31 at 68%. Will Howard, 17 for 21. Almost a perfect first half, by the way, from Will Howard. Absolutely cerebral and surgical with every one of his passes. He passes for 231 passing yards, and Riley Leonard, 255 passing yards. Will Howard threw for 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, and Riley Leonard actually threw for 3 and had that 1 rushing touchdown. So both quarterbacks and both teams, very, very, very clean game. The big stat that I want to point out to everybody, Ohio State's red zone efficiency. 6 for 6 in every one of their red zone attempts. They were able to extend drives. And that's the crazy thing about this is there was no, for the most part, there was absolutely, it was just a back and forth game. There was no big hit, big play, miraculous throw and catch. I mean, it was just straight up football for the most part. And Ohio State did a good job of extending drives out. And these were lengthy drives too by both teams. And Ohio State came out on top.
Well, Notre Dame has lived by the mistakes of their opponents. They've lived by the turnovers. You go back to the Georgia game. Georgia had the turnover right before halftime that resulted in 7 points. And then to start the third quarter, they had the 98-yard kickoff return for a touchdown. Notre Dame has lived by that, by the mistakes of the opponent. Ohio State was not going to make the critical mistake to lose this game. Therefore, they were not going to give Notre Dame something to capitalize off of. But to me, there's 3 stats that really stick out to me. Igbuka and Smith,
yes,
were targeted 13 times 11 completions. Smith with 88 yards, Ibuka 64 yards, a touchdown. 11 of 13 to the two best players on the field. Notre Dame had absolutely no answer for them. And if that was enough, Quinshon Judkins, 11 carries, 100 yards, 9.1 yards per carry with 2 rushing touchdowns. And on the flip side, the stat that sticks out for Notre Dame, Jeremiah Love, 4 carries, 3 yards.
Yep.
They just could not get the running game going. In fact, their 2 running backs, Price and Love, 7 carries for 16 yards. Riley Leonard with 17 carries, 9 of those coming on the first drive. So there was just no answer in the run game. And as we've seen all playoff long, we said it when Texas played Ohio State, Tennessee playing Ohio State, you've got to be able to run the ball and neutralize their offense and keep them on the sideline. And on the very first drive, when Notre Dame had the majority of their success, they were able to grind it out. They converted several third downs, a couple of fourth downs, and extended the drive, put points on the board. And at the end of the first quarter, you're looking at a 7-7 ball game. The problem with it was you knew after that first drive that Notre Dame would not be able to sustain that success. They would not be able to run their quarterback 9 times every single drive and just grind the ball out like that. Ohio State started walking some safeties down, getting in the box a little bit, and shutting the run game down. Now, in the second quarter, it looked like when the run game went away that Riley Leonard pressed a little bit, missed some open guys, and that allowed Ohio State to continue to add to their lead. But then Riley Leonard comes back in the late third and fourth quarter, and he made throws he's not made all season long. I mean, he was pretty good throwing late in the ball game, just a little bit too late.
Well, it's the question that we asked last week before we gave predictions was we knew coming into this, Notre Dame's run offense is very good. We knew coming into this that Ohio State has weapons all over the field on offense. So it was going to be up to the defenses of either team to stop them from extending drives. And it's evident on the third down percentages of both these teams, with Ohio State having a 75% third down rate and Notre Dame only having 41.7. Ohio State's defense did a very good job after the first couple of drives from Notre Dame of completely stopping the run for Notre Dame. And that was evidence in the statistics you gave. The only question that I have is 3rd and 12.
I can't get over that one.
No safety over the top. No safety over the top help. And you have clawed your way back, and needless to say, it's a game at this point. 3rd and 12, their best player goes on a one-on-one coverage, and that's what you do in that instance.
Let's paint the picture right here.
Yeah, paint it for them. Paint it for the listeners.
I went back and watched it just to make sure I had all the facts straight. Before the ball was snapped, Notre Dame still had a timeout. They still had the 2-minute timeout. There was 2 minutes, 36 seconds to go. It's 31-23. 3rd and 12. If Notre Dame gets a stop, they're getting the ball back. And the way they had moved it on the 3 previous drives, 2 of which resulted in touchdowns, 1 resulted in a missed field goal, it was looking like they were going to get the ball and at least drive down, score, or have a chance to score and tie the ball game up and force overtime. And you're sitting on 1st and 2nd down. You stack the box to stop the run. You force 3rd and 12. And if I'm a defensive coordinator, there's no way that I'm sitting there thinking that Chip Kelly is just going to run the ball right up the gut and punt it back to me and give me a chance to send this thing to overtime. You just had to have known that they were going to try to at least throw the ball. And really what I was thinking in that situation, they had run several comeback routes on the outside with Smith to where he would take off and sprint about 15 yards down the field like he was trying to beat you deep. And then all of a sudden, once you turned your hips, he would put his foot in the ground and he would turn around kind of like a deep curl out. And they were just utilizing that underneath stuff. And I really thought that they would run something similar to that in that situation, just try to get him past the sticks. And so I got to thinking before the ball was snapped, maybe they'll try to hit some kind of stop and go or something. And from the TV camera angle, I really didn't know what route he had ran because the TV was so zoomed in on Will Howard, and all of a sudden he just throws the ball, and then all of a sudden Smith comes into play. But when I went back and watched the all 22, the safety, the corner covering him was about 7 or 8 yards off the ball, playing 3 or 4 yards to the inside, almost like he was expecting him to run a slant or a post. And Smith just ran by him. He just ran by him. The guy never recovered, never got close. And the fact that there was no safety help over the top just kind of blew my mind in that situation. But, I mean, great call by Chip Kelly, even better execution, the absolute perfect throw in that situation from Will Howard. And it resulted in them icing away the game and kicking a field goal to extend the lead and thus icing the game to win the national title.
There's an old saying from the receiver room. You get that DB's hips flip, and if I'm even, I'm leaving. And boy, yep. Smith, he left and housed it. Overall, I was actually pleased with the game. It was pretty entertaining for the most part, with Ohio State coming out on top, 34-23. That is your national champions this year, the Ohio State Buckeyes. Little funny stat here. Since the inception of the college football playoff in 2014, there have been a total of 11 college football national championship games. 7 out of the 11 national champions have worn white jerseys. Out of the 11 national championship games that have played, the winners have worn white jerseys. The winners have worn white. So,
which tells you that once you get into the playoffs and ultimately the national championship game, that the lower ranked team, not always
have one more,
not always the favorite, but or the underdog, I guess I should say, because last night Ohio State was a lower ranked team, but they were the favorite to win it. But a lot of times the lower ranked team wins it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So this question here, this was a very highlighted topic coming into the game and after the game, especially. A lot of coverage on this topic right here was Ohio State's $20 million roster. So the big question is, did Ohio State buy a championship? And is the name of the game now, ye with the most money wins?
So here's my thoughts on this. First and foremost, yes, they bought a national championship, but going forward, that's what we're going to say about everybody that wins it. Everybody that wins it going forward is going to have bought the national championship. Here's my thoughts, and here's what I have to say on this. Coaches, schools, whatever, they perverted and really messed up what was meant to be good things. All right, so NIL was meant to be a good thing. You got players who come from all walks of life. You've got some guys, that are stuck at college with no money. They come from nothing, and yet you've got people just pouring in millions and millions of dollars every weekend to go watch them perform. I agree. They should get paid. They should get paid based on their name, image, and likeness and what they are contributing to the product on the field. What I don't like is how you got a group of coaches who have taken the NIL and made it a pay for play. And just absolutely thrown a bomb into what should be a good thing, and now it's just being abused. Secondly, you've got the transfer portal. Again, the transfer portal was meant to be a good thing. When you've got a player who commits to a coach and then that coach gets fired 1 or 2 years, or that coach leaves for a different job, and all of a sudden that player now is stuck there saying, hey, now all of a sudden I'm playing for a coach that I didn't commit to. I would like the opportunity to be able to go play for whoever I choose. I completely get that. You may have guys that, no offense to any school out there, but you may have guys that kind of go under the radar in high school, and they're not on anyone's radar, and they may end up committing to someone like a Troy, a South Alabama, a Sun Belt team, if you will. And after 2 years, it's pretty evident this kid doesn't belong in the Sun Belt. This kid needs the opportunity to go SEC, ACC, Big Ten, and really prove their value and worth and try to up their draft status by playing with the best of the best in these big conferences. And so the transfer portal was created and open for guys like that to kind of take a step up. And then you have guys that may go to an Alabama, an Auburn, Tennessee, Ohio State, Michigan, Notre Dame, whatnot, and they may be buried on the depth chart. And they may say, you know what? I'm running out of eligibility. I want to play. And so the portal's a good thing for those guys to be able to transfer out and go play somewhere. Someone like Jamison Williams from Ohio State, who was buried on the depth chart a few years ago. He transfers to Alabama, plays one season, turns it into a first-round draft status, and he's absolutely crushing it in the NFL. Here's the problem I have. The problem I have is with all the tampering and the back channeling going on.
Absolutely.
When you've got guys who are starting for major college football programs and are making playoff runs, and then all of a sudden their season ends and they say, you know what? So-and-so's offered me a bag. You know, when you look at the guys that transferred into Ohio State, you don't have the guys that transferred up trying to make a name for themselves. You don't have guys that were buried on the depth chart that's just wanting to go somewhere and play. You've got guys like Quinshon Judkins, Seth McLaughlin, Caleb Downs, Will Howard. You've got guys that are playing and starting for the group of four power conferences. You've got Ole Miss, who went 10-2 last year, barely missed the playoffs. Alabama's in the playoffs. And now all of a sudden you've got key players from all these different teams that have just all kinds of money thrown at them to come to Ohio State. That's, I think, the problem that most people have with how they done this, how they just kind of went out and cherry-picked 5 or 6 players off some of the best teams in the country to create this all-star team, if you will. And basically that's why everybody's saying they bought a championship.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely exquisite. I would have to concur.
It's not something we've seen. The transfer portal has been a thing for 6 or 7 years now since they've waived the rule to where you don't have to sit out a year. NIL's been around for 4 or 5 years now. But this is the first time that we've really seen a team go into several conferences and just pick apart 3 or 4 teams' rosters and pull the best players off those rosters and kind of create that super team like that.
Well, it was mainly SEC players. So what does that say about the level of talent that you're picking from?
Absolutely.
And I'm not saying that, all the talent came from the SEC, because he did spend quality money on players that he recruited in. An example, Jeremiah Smith. But NIL definitely has changed the landscape. And I always go back to this, because it's probably the greatest quote ever about the situation and the state of college football that it's in. Is you have coaches that are now being transactional coaches versus transformational coaches. And Coach Saban said this week 4 of the college football season on College Game Day. You've got guys who are going out and chasing money in college instead of development for the NFL. And I would love to see a study on how much the NIL has impacted under development for the NFL, because you've got guys that are moving around so much at such a younger age that they're not developing their skill set. They're not growing into the position that they're wanting to play. And it's got to change at some point.
Let's say that I heard, and I should have written this down, but I was driving and it came across the radio. I heard somewhere along the lines of like 60% fewer juniors are leaving early for the NFL draft than what was in years past. So that tells me one of two things. Either there's not enough juniors that are prepared and ready for the draft because they're not developed, and reasons why guys are not being developed. You've got players that are staying at the same school for 3, 4, 5 years and not being developed the way they were 15, 20 years ago, because they're having to be coddled because the coaches are afraid that they're going to transfer on them. So it's not just the guys that are leaving and bouncing from place to place are not being developed. But the thing about it is in the long run, yes, it worked out for Will Howard, Judkins, Caleb Downs, Seth McLaughlin. I would say those 4 guys. Well, I'm not going to say Caleb Downs because he would have been drafted high last year as a freshman. But I think Will Howard, Seth McLaughlin, Quinshon Judkins probably would have went high. But couple of those guys, you can say that they improved their draft stock by transferring. I think Cam Ward maybe increased his draft stock by transferring. But for the most part, how many guys transfer out going to look for that big payday or going to look for their big opportunity, and you never hear from them again?
Isaiah Bond, Amari Niblack.
And you look at Carson Beck, the second thing it tells me about the juniors not declaring for the draft. It's been reported that Carson Beck's getting anywhere between 2.5 and 6 million. I've heard anywhere in between is the number that he's getting. If that's true, he's going to be making more from his base contract or his base NIL deal at Miami next year than about 80% of the upcoming rookies in the NFL draft this year. That is insane. We've taken the minor league. If you look at college as being the minor league, we've taken the minor leagues and we've created a system to where these guys can get paid more than what the professionals are getting paid.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it's nuts. It's crazy to see.
All right. So we have gotten to the end of the season. And as we introduced a new president of the United States yesterday, and again, we're not getting political or anything, but Tyler, I want you to jump in here, and for the next couple of minutes, I am nominating you as the president of NCAA football. Not commissioner. We're going to set that role aside for Nick Saban, but you are the president of the NCAA football, and I want you to just give us the state of the NCAA address. Tell us where we're at right now. Tell us where we're going. Tell us what needs to be fixed. Tell us what needs to be done, and give us your plan to straighten all this out.
There is no plan yet. That will be for further discussion, but I rest my case, and we shall begin. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed members of the NCAA community, players, coaches, fans, and stakeholders. Today, we gathered to discuss the current state of NCAA football, a sport that has captivated millions and shaped the lives of countless student athletes. While we celebrate the successes and the achievements of our programs and give credit to this year's national champion, Ohio State, it is imperative that we take a moment to address the challenges we face in this evolving landscape. First, let us confront the issue of name, image, and likeness. The introduction of NIL rights has undoubtedly transformed the college football landscape, providing athletes with opportunities to monetize their personal brands. This change is a significant step forward, allowing student athletes to benefit from their hard work and dedication. However, we must also recognize the complexities and challenges that have arisen from this newfound freedom. The disparity in resources among universities has created an uneven playing field to where some programs are able to offer lucrative deals that far exceed those available to others. This raises questions about equity and fairness in recruiting, as well as the potential for a divide between the haves and the have-nots in college football. Moreover, the influence of external entities, boosters, agents, marketing agencies, has increased, leading to concerns about the recruitment process and the integrity of the sport itself. We must find a way to ensure that NIL opportunities do not overshadow the primary mission of college athletics, education and personal development, and the camaraderie and the brotherhood of football. Next, we turn our attention to the transfer portal. The transfer portal has given athletes the flexibility to pursue new opportunities and find the right fit for their skills and aspirations. This freedom is essential in a system that has often tied athletes to programs that may not serve their best interests. However, the ease of transferring has also led to a wave of instability. Programs face challenges in building cohesive teams as rosters change drastically from year to year. The recruiting landscape has shifted, with coaches now tasked not only with recruiting high school talent, but also actively managing their current rosters to prevent attrition. Younger players no longer have loyalty to the program and dissipate a way in which they receive no development skills. We must ensure that the transfer portal serves its intended purpose while also maintaining the integrity and the continuity of our programs. Lastly, we must address the College Football Playoff Committee and the ongoing debate surrounding its structure and decision-making process. While the CFP has brought excitement and a new level of competition to the college football era, it has also sparked controversy regarding the selection criteria and their transparency. The committee's decisions can sometimes seem arbitrary, leading to questions about bias in the representation of different conferences. In utilizing a private-based source of analytics, there was no show clause to where committee the committee was hidden away from any retributions for their actions this season. We must work towards a more transparent process that allows for open dialogue and clearer guidelines on how teams are evaluated, mainly utilizing a format to where certain wins are credited and strength of schedule is a statute that we gaze upon to guide decisions. Additionally, as we consider expanding the playoff format, we must ensure that any changes promote the welfare and the camaraderie and the brotherhood of the game, giving the best teams a chance to compete for the national title. In conclusion, the challenges we face in NCAA football, NIL, the transfer portal, and the college football playoff are significant, but they are not insurmountable. As we move forward, we must prioritize the core values of college athletics, education, integrity, and the well-being of our students' athletes. Let us engage in constructive dialogue, collaborate on innovative solutions, and remain committed to preserving the spirit of college football. Together, we can navigate these challenges and ensure a future for the sport that we all love. Thank you, my fellow Americans.
So you said something right there that I really like in your closing statement, and that is open dialogue.
Yes.
I think that's the biggest thing going forward is we've got to have some tough conversations, and we've got to create a system that everyone agrees on moving forward to where we have the best product on the field. And honestly, that's going to be the biggest obstacle, because you're going to have the teams like Boise State and SMU and Arizona State. You know, you're going to have teams like that we look at from the South or the Southeastern Conference. We look at those teams and we look at their strength of schedule and we go, you know what? There's no reason that those teams should have made the playoffs. Well, those teams are going to sit there and say, well, we don't see any reason why 9-3 Alabama, South Carolina, or Ole Miss should have gotten the playoffs. And there's just got to be this common ground. And again, I guess it's because of growing up watching SEC football and just seeing the meat grinder that these teams go through every year. We're always going to stand on the argument that strength of schedule has to matter. You're going to have teams like Boise from the Mountain West that can go 12-0 every year in their conference because they're head and shoulders above everybody, and they're going to say, well, wins has to matter. We've just got to find that common ground on it.
Absolutely. And that's the thing with that speech. I know it's all fun and games and it's hilarious, but in all seriousness, there has to be openness throughout the entire landscape of the NCAA, to where it's going to have to come down to where we have a commissioner and a actual committee, not a college football committee, but a committee that ensures the rights of universities and players alike to battle NIL, transfer portal, and the selection committee. And that's all I have for that.
Well, and the thing about it is, it's so hard to find common ground, and it's so hard. I mean, we can sit here and we can have conversations all day long and say, hey, what would you do to fix this? What would you do to fix this? And I'll be honest, in 75, 80% of the conversations that I have with people, the number one answer to fix a lot of this is contracts. It's contracts. Everybody says we need contracts, we need contracts, we need contracts. Well, the problem with that is college athletes are still considered amateurs. And you can't take an amateur and legally bind them to a contract. It's just like the kid from Wisconsin who signed a 2-year NIL agreement, not a binding contract, a 2-year NIL agreement to go play football for Wisconsin for 2 years out of high school. And after his first year, he's like, you know what? I've got a huge offer from Miami. I'm leaving and going to Miami. And he just completely broke off his agreement with Wisconsin. So Wisconsin steps in and says, hey, you know what? We're going to block your transfer. We're not going to let you leave, and we're not going to let you transfer because we've got you in an NIL agreement. And so the young man goes to the NCAA, and the NCAA rules in the player's favor. And they pretty much tell Wisconsin that an NIL agreement is not a binding agreement where you can hold a player hostage and make him stay here. He's free to go to Miami. So we've taken all the power and all the authority, and we put it in 18 to 22-year-olds who maybe are not at a point in their life when they're mature enough to make what decision is best for them, and they're just doing whatever they want. You look at Wisconsin. Wisconsin was pretty much told by the NCAA that the NIL agreement is binding for you. You would have to have a place for him for 2 years and pay him, but it's not binding for the player. He can leave and go do whatever he wants. That's a problem. That is an issue. Wisconsin came out and told the NCAA and showed documentation. We've got proof that he was tampered with from Miami before he ever entered the transfer portal. NCAA just kind of turned their eye the other way and still ruled in the young man's favor. And that's another thing we've got to fix. Either make tampering legal or actually come up with a type of punishment to where these schools that when they tamper, they think twice about doing it again in the future.
Probation or something.
You've got to do something moving forward. I don't know. And again, we've changed the landscape of college football so much with NIL and the transfer portal, and we didn't even have any rules in place. We didn't have any guidelines in place. We just all of a sudden said, hey, players can transfer unlimited times, players can make money, and there's really no guidelines and stuff for it. And it's just gotten crazy. And that's the thing about the coaches. Could you imagine being a coach and knowing that a minute a player steps foot on your campus, at any point in time, he can leave?
Mm-hmm.
In the NFL, when you sign someone, you can sign them to a 1-year deal, 2-year deal, 3-year deal, 4-year. Every player that walks through the doors on these college campuses, it's a day-to-day basis.
Well, that's the thing is, like, you're as a coach now, you're constantly having to recruit your own team throughout the season. That adds another level of stress that they have to constantly think about while also getting these guys ready to play on Saturday. I mean, because at the drop of a hat, they could pull up to the office and say, hey, I'm out. I just got offered a bag across the nation. I'm going over there. So they're constantly having to utilize tactics to keep their own team there.
Well, that's why you see guys like the quarterback from UNLV who played 4 games. UNLV's undefeated. And he says, hey, you know what? I think I'm worth more money than what y'all guys are giving me. So I'm just going to go into the portal, and I'm going to not play anymore this year, and I'm going to redshirt and save myself 1 year of eligibility, and I'll go somewhere else next year and try to get me a huge bag. And I think it was Pat McAfee. I was watching him today, and he made the comment. He said, 15 years ago, it was all about who could build the nicest facility, who could build the nicest players' lounge, who could have the nicest weight room, who had the nicest nutrition. Then it became about coming and playing for a winner, and let's go play for championships. And now it's gotten down to who can write the biggest check.
Yep.
It's not about building relationships with these guys. It's not about building relationships with high school coaches and traveling throughout the country. It's about, hey, you come here, we pay you this.
Yep. That's
That's
it.
what it is.
That is it. So, 2025 SEC playoff contenders.
Yeah, as we go ahead and kind of turn the page and we start looking toward next year, kind of some contenders. Again, my biggest complaint right now about the SEC, all schedules are not created equal. You look at Georgia's schedule next year. Georgia has to host Alabama. Georgia has to host Texas. Georgia has to host Ole Miss. Georgia has to go to Tennessee. Georgia has to go to Auburn. They have to play Florida. That is a meat grinder of a schedule. Meanwhile,
Texas.
You look at Texas's schedule. Early on, Georgia is going to be the only top 10 type team that Texas is going to play from the SEC. And then at the end of the year, they'll play Texas A&M, who, let's be honest, I guess you could say they overachieved. Really, they just kind of had an easier road in the beginning. And their last 4 games, they actually started getting into some decent competition. They finished 8-4. So maybe Texas A&M is ranked toward the end of the year. Tennessee has one of the easier schedules. They go to Alabama, they host Georgia. That is going to be the only 2 games that I would think would even be close to them not being a favorite in. And they may actually even be a 1 or 2 point favorite over Alabama at that point in time. I just think there's got to be some way to fix these schedules to where you don't have one team playing 5 or 6 of the best teams in the conference, while another team is playing 5 or 6 of the worst teams in the conference.
Mm-hmm. There's got to be some sort of format to where, and who knows, maybe it'll get changed after the playoff expands. It just depends on what Sankey. It really depends on next year's Selection Sunday. Come time for that, as far away as that is, on how the format will change for the following 2026 season. But like you said, there's got to be a format in which sort of levels it out to how many. And we use this term a lot. We like to we like to patternise football with basketball because that's really kind of how it needs to be leveled out with quad 1, quad 2, quad 3. But there's got to be some sort of way that you can level out what level of competition you're playing within the SEC, but not only within the SEC, within the entire NCAA. And maybe we'll get to that eventually.
Well, and that's the one thing about college football that would be hard to do that.
It would.
With basketball, each team's playing 30, 32 games, so you've got time to kind of level out and know who's what, to where in college football, you're only playing 12 games, so it's a little bit harder to come to that conclusion. But, I mean, you just look at Florida's schedule next year. If I'm looking at this graphic right here and I'm picking out, if you just say, tell me who you think are the 4 best teams, the 4 best teams in the SEC next year, I'm going to say Georgia, obviously. I would say Texas. I would say – I want to say Ole Miss, but, with Jackson Dart leaving, I don't know. I think LSU is going to be very good with Nussmeier coming back. But, again, they've got a bit of a tough schedule, having to play Ole Miss, having to play Alabama. So – When I start looking at who I think the playoff contenders are next year, I'm not so much looking at who I think has the best roster and who I think has the best players, but I'm looking at who has the easiest path. I don't like that. I don't like looking at it that way, because just in this one conference right here, we're talking about strength of schedule, and we're harping on Indiana and how Indiana didn't belong because they didn't play anybody. Well, again, no offense to Texas, but you could say the same thing for Texas. Mm-hmm. What win did Texas have in the regular season to where you go, man, Texas showed up tonight. Boy, Texas is really doing something big. You better watch out for Texas come playoff time. They really didn't have any. Mm-hmm. So I would say, Texas, Georgia. I really think Alabama is going to have one of the best defenses in the country next year with everything that they've got coming back, but their schedule is so brutal. Again, Tennessee, they're opening up at Florida State, and I know Florida State went 2-10, but they've completely flip-flopped their roster through the transfer portal again this year. Wisconsin's coming in. They go to Auburn, to South Carolina, to Georgia. Tennessee's there. It's just a meat grinder. LSU's coming to Tuscaloosa. It's just a meat grinder of a schedule. And if you're telling me to predict Alabama for next year right now today, I think 9-3 is probably best case scenario.
And I'll play the flip side of it. Since you looked mainly at path, I'm going to go the talent route. And for me, Texas still has a high level of talent. They're always going to have a high level of talent. They're going to always have money for NIL. I think that Texas is going to be your contender, one of your contenders. Another contender for me is going to be South Carolina. I do think that Coach Beamer has developed a winning culture, so to speak. I know the bowl game didn't work out for him this year, but if Lenora Sellers stays, they get a few key guys in. I know if Nick Harbor stays at receiver, I don't know what age group he is, if he's eligible.
It was a freshman.
That's what I thought. If he stays, if they get a couple of guys in the backfield, a couple of guys stay on defense, Dylan Stewart, I think Kennard is gone. So I think that they could have a level of competition to where they could be right on the edge, 9-3, 10-2 again. With the level
I wanted to say South Carolina. I wanted to say South Carolina, but when I watched them in the bowl game without Kennard, to where Illinois was able to really double team Stewart and neutralize him. It looked like it took a lot away from their defense, but it was also a meaningless bowl game. So
yeah,
I don't know how much stock to put into that.
No. And that's the thing is that if they get a couple more key guys, through the portal or through recruiting, I think they've got a squad. So Texas, South Carolina, Tennessee, I think talent-wise, Nico coming back. I know running back room's a little skimp, but their path mixed in with the talent for this one, they've got a good path mixed with the talent. I know I said I'd stick with talent. And LSU with Nussmeier coming back. So
I think Ole Miss and LSU and South Carolina, when you look at those three teams, they all play each other. Mm-hmm. And I think one of those three teams gets in. Which one, I don't know. But when you look at LSU, obviously they took the beating by Alabama this year. They lost to South Carolina, or actually they beat South Carolina because of the refs. But when you look at Ole Miss, they lost to Kentucky, a game they shouldn't have lost, kept them out of the playoffs. Alabama lost to Vanderbilt and Oklahoma, 2 games that they should not have lost, kept them out of the playoffs. That's the thing for me going forward with the SEC next year is can teams like Alabama and Ole Miss win the games they're supposed to win and not have the letdown? But I'll save it for final thoughts.
There you go. Moving into our last segment of the day. It's everybody's favorite segment of the evening. It is the SEC Mafia Final Thoughts.
All right, so for me, the final thoughts. We've had this conversation going about the SEC. Is the SEC down? It's the Big Ten, the new standard in college football. Don't know if you noticed it last night, but when they were doing the coin flip, did you notice when the head referee comes out and he introduces himself to the captains and he says, I'm so-and-so, so-and-so, I'm from the SEC, will be your official? Did you notice the echoes of boos that just rained down by the referee saying he was from the SEC? I thought that was pretty funny.
That's awesome.
It's funny how the SEC is in everybody's head. I've seen so many Ohio State flags and comments last night about how, where's the SEC? The SEC's not here. And it's like you're playing for a national championship and you can't even enjoy it. You can't even enjoy it for worrying about what the SEC's doing. But here's my final thoughts. Going back to the season-long debate, I think the SEC's lack of success the last couple of years can be summed up by one thing. It's not NIL. SEC schools, even Vanderbilt, have plenty of money. It's not recruiting. They recruit the best players in the country. They're going to have 75% of the top recruiting classes. When you look at the top 25 recruiting classes, almost every SEC school is going to be within that top 25. I saw a mock draft the other day, and I think 13 of the first-round NFL draftees are projected to come from SEC schools. The next highest was the Big Ten. They had like 10 or 11. So more players are going to get drafted early from the SEC. I think the difference has been quarterback play. Mm-hmm. When you go back to 2020 at the season Mac Jones had, and then you go back to Bryce Young winning a Heisman, Jaden Daniels winning a Heisman. You look at how good Stetson Bennett was in college, how good Stetson Bennett was, and you start looking at Hendon Hooker from Tennessee, and you start looking all throughout the conference at the great quarterback play that we've had the last 8-10 years. The last couple of years, we've had some very, very sporadic and inconsistent quarterback play. Look at Carson Beck. 1 week, Carson Beck looks like a first-round draft pick. The next week, he's throwing 3 or 4 interceptions. 1 week, Jalen Milroe's running all over LSU. He's putting up almost 400 total, almost 500 yards on Georgia. And then the next week, he turns the ball over 3 times against Oklahoma. It's just inconsistent quarterback play. And I think that has been the difference and what has cost the SEC these meaningful playoff games is the inconsistent quarterback play. You go back to Georgia this year with Carson Beck getting hurt and Stockton coming in and being a little bit inconsistent. You look at Milroe last year against Michigan, how inconsistent he was. Nico could never get anything going against Ohio State this year. Meanwhile, you look at Will Howard, who's been around forever, been in several different systems. J.J. McCarthy last year at Michigan, how he had been around for a year, and you saw the consistent quarterback play elevate those teams. We don't have the quarterbacks in the SEC, or we have not had last year or this year, the quarterbacks that could put a team on their back for the entire season and elevate them and get them across the finish line.
Mm-hmm. I love that. That's a great final thought. And I agree with you, because if you take a look at all the Big Ten quarterbacks, Will Howard, Dylan Gabriel with Oregon.
You had Bo Nix at Oregon the last year.
Bo Nix at Oregon the last year, who was an SEC product. I mean, you're correct. You're absolutely correct. There has not been in the last couple of years a quarterback from the SEC that just puts the weight on his shoulders and carries a team through, and that's what we're missing.
And to further drive home the exclamation point, just look at the Heisman rankings the last couple of years.
Yep.
This year in particular, you did not have an SEC player in New York for the first time in ages.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the SEC has a quarterback problem. Now, there are several guys that have been recruited. Several guys have transferred in. The Mateer kid to Oklahoma. You've got Keelan Russell, who's committed and on campus at Alabama right now. Nussmeier coming back for another year. You've got some guys that have the opportunity to put their teams on their back going forward. We've just not seen it the last couple of years.
You have not. Great final thought for this episode, Mr. Randy from Northern Alabama this week. He will be back in Mobile next week. We shall return next week, continuing on with off-season activities. Yeah. Good episode today. Enjoyed it. It was fun. I hope everybody at home that listened to that State of the NCAA address, you better clap when I finished the last sentence. You had better clap.
I'm sure they did.
They did. I know they did. I can feel it in my spirit. I feel it in my spirit. Y'all clapped for me, didn't you?
I'm sure the comments will be full of people telling you should run for public office after that.
Hey, look, if you enjoyed it, please in the comments leave Tyler from T-Town for NCAA President 2028. We're going to take over this nation by storm, baby.
All right, guys. See y'all.